Hello, and welcome to the Youth Empowerment and Military Careers Voice of Veterans podcast, where we highlight the stories, experiences, and lessons of those who've served in the military. We aim to honor their journeys and inspire the next generation of military innovators and leaders. Hello, Mr. Steve Taylor, and thanks for taking your time out of your day to be here with the YMC team. Would you care to begin by giving some insight about yourself and your position in the Navy?
Sure. I'm not sure how far back you want me to go, but I grew up in Fresno, California. Wanted to go to the Naval Academy ever since my older brother had been there, and I had visited him, and it was, my first memory of visiting him when I was 12 years old kind of set the course for the next 20 years. I knew that was something I wanted to be a part of once I saw it, but didn't get accepted in the Naval Academy my first time out. I went to University of California for a year, reapplied and got accepted. From there, I went to the Naval Academy, spent 4 years there. My undergraduate degree is in oceanography, but with most people at the Naval Academy, well, with everybody at the Naval Academy, you get pretty much an engineering degree as well. Um, From there, I was commissioned. I served on a ship in, let's see, out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Spent a lot of time in the Far East, Korea, Japan, the Philippines, a couple other places. Came back and then volunteered to go to a place called Bahrain, which is in the Middle East. And then the Gulf War happened. It was already going by the time I got there, so you can't blame me for that one. But spent a year there. I was a weapons officer on a large ship in Bahrain, home port in Bahrain, and then moved back to the Bay Area. From there, I was on a Coast Guard staff where I worked on plans and exercises, mostly port defense type things and security type initiatives, and left the Navy in, let's see, back in 1994. I was a lieutenant and was actually I had a my next assignment was going to be in Suda Bay, Crete, and I opted to resign because I knew I was going to get out of the Navy. I thought it would be easier to get out of the Navy and transition um, while I was stationed in the United States as opposed to being overseas again.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I really didn't have much to do with the Navy for a long time, maybe 25 years or so, and then became more interested. I founded a company, um, and I had always remembered how many veterans I had worked with when I got out of the Navy, and it was always on my mind that eventually I wanted to give back. And as it happens, I founded one company that I was recruited to be the partner in another, where we represent quite a few companies that are looking to expand. And I ended up going back to my service roots and working with a lot of Naval Academy grads initially, and then West Pointers, and then other academy. And then from there, I've just expanded. I've niched into, I work probably 99% of my clients are military veterans, and that other 1% are referrals. So pretty much everybody I work with now is a veteran, and
Mm-hmm.
I I just enjoy that relationship, that credibility, knowing the type of people I work with, knowing what their values are or should be, anyways, and going from there.
Just out of curiosity, are you the first generation in your family to be a part of the military?
No, let's see, my dad, probably my father. He had grown up on a farm and very large family, and his brothers had. Sir, it was during World War II when he moved, and so pretty much every male in that family had been in the military. And then my father um, uh, was actually got involved in a pilot program or aviation program where he trained to be a naval aviator, and then the war ended and he left the Navy. But that other than that, I had other uncles and that sort of thing. I'm not sure further back if
Mhm.
there were others, but
Yeah.
Yeah. During your time in the Navy, what was one of the toughest challenges that you had, and how did you manage to push through it?
wow, that's a good one. Um, Probably academically. I was never a real strong academic, so so when I went to the Naval Academy, I was competing with a very, very well-educated group of men and women. That was very difficult, and I think when I reflect on it, I think the way I got through that was I refused to quit, and just told myself, I just psyched myself up. I said, "Do you know how humiliating it will to go home without succeeding?" And that's kinda how I did it then.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's
I mean, yeah, it's always important to keep pushing yourself
yeah, determination.
Yeah.
Additionally, was there anything or anyone actually specifically that had the biggest impact on helping you go through this?
Huh. I don't know if there's one person. Um, I mean, certainly my parents,
Mm.
um, they're always very encouraging. My father was first he had 12 brothers and sisters, and he was the only one to graduate from college. And, so he had grown up going to a one, room schoolhouse where it was so small, they only taught, so they taught from 1st through 8th grade in that,
Wow.
and it was so small, they only did 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th grade 1 year, and then the next year, they'd do 2nd, 4th. So he always said he was blessed because he did 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, in but because the way he said his poor brother, his next older brother, had actually taken 2nd, and they didn't even have kindergarten, forget about that. So my point is he ended up going to MIT, and he's like, "Steve, if I can if I can suffer through that or, have such a basic childhood education and still compete, get Bs at MIT." um, he never said, "You should be able to do this," but, um, I guess it was his example and, his will to get through it, and, yeah,
Yeah. You can accomplish anything you want to if you have determination and, like, wanna
pretty
reach your
much,
goal.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so how would you describe your first trainings in like basic training? How your experience in that? How was it?
Um Well, kind of the funny story, so my son is probably a couple years older than you are. He's 19, and he's in college right now, and he's going through a Marine Corps program. And he went through they have a 4-day training period, which is his first exposure, and, so he just completed it on Sunday, that 4 days, and talking to him, it just kinda recollected some of those first times, but I would say my parents saved a lot of my letters, but this is a long time ago before email, before a lot of the things, that you're familiar with, but I wrote a letter. We had to write a letter home to tell our parents that we had arrived safely and all that, and I got about 10 words on each side of the page, and I said something about have so much respect or more respect for Brad, my older brother who had done that 7 years prior, now. So, it was very rough, very, I was pretty physically fit then, and, just a lot of running, a lot of, focus time, a lotta, development, so you would start at 5 something in the morning, and this was in Maryland, and, you go do physical training first thing in the morning. You think, "Oh, cool, get your workout out of the way." but it was so humid there overnight, they're just heavy coat of dew on everything. So we worked out on AstroTurf, right? Which is okay, but and it was right by the Chesapeake Bay, and you're thinking, oh, okay. Well, the thing is, there are a lot of seagulls. A lot of seagulls would deposit what seagulls deposit on that field,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so think about very heavy humidity, a lot of wetness, a lot of
Mm.
other stuff, and then the guy who led the training was a German guy, very, very heavy German accent. And the rumor was he had as a young man he had trained the SS in Germany, and he'd urge us on, big speakers, microphone, come on, 87, that was my class, move together, bleed together. And to this day, I get together with classmates and we'll joke about that and just how painful and awful that was. And move together, bleed together.
So that was kind of like a memorable story that you had from your experience.
Sure.
So, Isha, you can continue.
Yeah, so so based on your role and or deployments per se, what was your overall experience and how does it affect your life today? Like, do any of those experiences affect your life today?
Sure. So I'm currently mentoring about 150 men and women that are transitioning,
Oh.
and that was literally I just came from that. It was a web-based mentoring where they asked me the same question, but again, I like stories, so I'm sorry, yeah, and I like to think I'm funny. My wife thinks I overshare, but um, so sleep was at a premium. So when you're at sea, you're awake a lot, and sometimes you work 24 hours a day, that sort of thing. And so we have three children, including twins. And I used to tell other parents of twins, especially fathers, the most important experience coming out of the Navy, uh, working with twins, is I learned in the Navy how to stay awake all night without killing anything. And I'd look at my kids, and say, "Yeah, you guys survived because, they were, they were older at that point. They were pretty tired of, dad jokes and Navy stories and all that. But there's some truth in there. Staying focused for long periods of time. Um, realizing what the stakes are. I learned how to drink coffee when I was in the Navy, just because I had to figure out how to stay awake. Um, and and really gain a good sense of what I liked and didn't like, what I was good at and what I was less than good at. Um, that all that the great thing about the military is, for me, one of the great things is you're given an environment where you are given the opportunity to make mistakes and in safe spaces, right? I mean, obviously you don't want to make a mistake with a weapon. Um, but there's a lot of great training. There's a lot of experience, a lot of responsibilities you never get in the civilian world. In fact, a lot of people have a hard time transitioning, in my experience, because they don't have that sense of camaraderie, that sense of, in my case, I was in charge of maybe a $500 million ship. Well, that's very rare in the civilian, as a young man, get out of the military, they're not gonna give you the responsibility for a $500 million uh, plant or whatever, but you get that. So you get comfortable with leadership, big numbers, heavy responsibilities or big responsibilities. And, yeah, I hopefully I answered your question, but those type of experiences, I don't nothing has come close to replicating that since
Mhm.
I left the military.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Um, so for teenagers thinking about joining the military, is there any advice you would give?
Um, Let me answer that a little bit differently. I believe that the military is a great option for maybe 90% of today's youth. And I'll tell you why. I think you get pushed in ways you never anticipate. Like I said, you learn what you're good at, you learn what you're not good at, you learn what it is to identify with something larger than yourself. And it used to be when I was in high school, everybody did high school athletics, or almost everybody, and you get that same type of experience. I don't, my kids, growing up in Pleasanton, I mean, eh, in my mind, athletics aren't afforded to everybody. Like, you have to have money. Like, for me, you showed up and maybe you sold candy bars to raise enough money so you could afford a bus to the games or something like that. But, like, when my son played football, I wanna say we had to come up with $1,000 in a public school, which is very different than when I was. My point is you get those opportunities in the military. You can learn a trade. You can learn a lot of life skills. It's just a great experience. You may meet, friends you have for the rest of your life. So, um, yeah, I would say, investigate it. Don't limit yourself. Practical. Don't find a trusted veteran, and before you sign anything, have them read the papers they're going to ask you to sign. Um, get everything in writing. There are 5 military services, right? Talk to each of them because each of them have a little different flavor, and maybe you identify more with one service over another. They all, I can make jokes about each of them. I mean, but not one of them's better than the other. They're just a little bit different.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And also sorry, would you recommend, like, even kids who are not maybe going down military route just for the discipline and, like, kinda, like, better like, more respect towards others, would you recommend them doing, like, a military kinda, like, program or training?
You mean prior, like in high school, that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
like, in high school.
I'm not real familiar with it. It doesn't, again, I'm gonna answer that a little, differently. I make a habit of calling people sir and ma'am when they're clients, occasionally, not, rigidly. But my point is I think as a culture, we've gotten away from that a little bit, and, doesn't matter, if they're junior or senior to me, I think that's important. That's something, in other cultures, I think does do a lot better at, and I think it's something that's reinforced in the military that I think, um, is not a bad thing. I mean, I'm not sure I would have a problem calling you ma'am or miss or, whatever. I mean, you guys are a little young, but just getting that habit of looking people straight in the eye, um, treating them with respect and yeah, I think that's good. I just don't know enough about, like, junior ROTC, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Okay, so were there any important lessons, values, or advice you picked up during your service that you still use now?
Um, you know what? No matter what you do, no matter what job you have, do it to the best of your ability. I think that's important, if you're in the military or not. Um, I think when you get your first job, if you haven't had one, you're gonna get the lowest jobs. I worked in fast food when I was in high school, and there are things called grease traps. If you ever worked in a restaurant, they're pretty disgusting. But I remember working very hard to make them as clean as possible, and I would say no matter what you do to the best of your ability, focus on that, be the best. The only response to getting a bad assignment is a smile and "Yes, sir," um, and practice saying that. And if you can convince yourself that's the best thing, then you'll treat it like the best thing, and you'll convince those around you. That's where real leadership comes in, is doing the right thing no matter who's watching, and just do that in a way that other people aspire to be like you.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm,
That it?
Do you have any questions you wanna ask?
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, you gave us a lot of insight, and we're really grateful for that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Taylor, for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners here?
No, if anybody has any questions, I don't know if you put up my email address or, probably not a good idea to put my phone number up, but,
Yeah.
or my website, people are welcome to contact, book 15 minutes. Um, I think it's really, the military in the US is very, very important, and, we used to have a draft, and theoretically, it was supposed to take, um, a very broad segment of the population, and when it did, I think it worked really well. Now we have an all-volunteer military, and it seems like there are certain demographics, certain regions of the country provide more volunteers than others, and I would really encourage anybody who, even if you're not seriously considering it, look into it. I think there are a lot of programs, there's a lot of opportunity. I know when you're 18, 4 years seems a lot longer than when you're 60 years old. Um, but I think it's a worthwhile institution, and I just encourage people, give it a look, think about it, you know?